this over, but maybe we can have some more conversations later through the day or what we need to do with what our challenges are.
Hey everyone, it's Navi from Tech and Learning. Hope you're all doing well. It's about 11:05 Eastern time, so let's get started. So first, I'd like to thank each of you for attending today's Tech and Learning Virtual Leadership Summit. It's being held today and tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern. Special thank you to our sponsors, Guide 12, Now Forecast 5 Analytics, MediaSite, Prezi, and Noriva. I'd like to remind everyone to log into the Conference Hub using the link sent in your confirmation email. Once you're logged in, you can visit a sponsor booth and a Zoom meeting room to learn about the sponsors' offerings and to book one-on-one meetings with each of them. Each visit to a Zoom room earns you 20 entries to your Passport to Prizes. We'll announce the winners via email at the end of the conference. You'll also be able to see your personalized agenda, network with today's attendees, and access conference resources in the download section. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions for presenters during the session, please submit them through the chat feature. Today's slides and additional resource materials are available and may be accessed in the Downloads tab within the Conference Hub. Be sure to use the conference hashtag #TLTechLive in any social posts that you have. With that being said, please join me in welcoming our moderator, Ray Bendici from Tech and Learning. Ray, I'll turn it over to you and your panelists.
Hey everybody, thank you, good morning. You've already heard from Karen Fuller from Cypress-Fairbanks, a little bit from her. Welcome everyone to this event today. We're really excited, a lot of great stuff going on. I don't want to take up too much of the time in the session, we just want to jump right in. I just wanted to officially welcome everyone, introduce our two speakers for this session, which is student data privacy. Ivy Nelson from Belton School District, and as I said, Karen Fuller from Cypress-Fairbanks ISD, who we already heard from. So without further ado, go ahead. I believe Ivy is starting, correct?
Yes. All right, if you'll give me the ability to share my screen, I've got some slides to share. My name is Ivy Nelson. I work in the Belton School District, which is on the south side of Kansas City, Missouri. It is a district of about 4,500 students, so much, much smaller than Karen's district in Texas. I've worked in public education for over 11 years now, from a classroom teacher to a tech integration specialist, and now I'm the education technology manager for my district and work K-12 with teachers integrating technology. So I'm very passionate about student data privacy, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we'll get started. So this quote is from Arne Duncan, the former US Secretary of Education, that we must provide our schools, teachers, and students cutting-edge learning tools, and we must also protect our children's privacy. So we have to do both of those goals. And so that is the whole trouble with education right now, right? We're all, having to do virtual and embrace all the technology, but then we have to also be safe about it. So what happened in the middle of March when schools started closing, we had all of these tech companies emailing out, oh, free access, free accounts for teachers. You don't have to pay for this resource now since your school is closed. Sign up here, sign up there. And there was a huge spreadsheet that was circulating social media of all the companies giving access to free resources now with school closures. And I took that spreadsheet and I vetted it against how we vet apps in my district. And maybe 1/3 of the apps were COPA compliant, FERPA compliant, house their data on US soil, all of those big things that I look for whenever I am deciding if an app is going to be safe for student and staff data. So we have this study by Common Sense Media in 2019 comparing screen use for tweens age 8 to 12 and teens 13 to 19, comparing it against 2015 data. So as you can see, the screen time went up with both groups quite a bit. But then think about, okay, in 2019, we had teens spending over 7 hours online, and that's just for entertainment purposes. So not factoring in school. So now think about schools closing and kids doing virtual and online instruction. How many hours are they spending on a screen now? right? It's kind of a scary thought. So it's not an easy task to make a data privacy policy for your district. We need to comply with existing federal and state privacy regulations, which are very complex, and the climate is constantly shifting with new state privacy laws being introduced at record pace. So we have to be compliant with regulation, and that's considered to be the floor, not the ceiling, right? So where do we go from there? To truly protect the privacy and security of student data, educational organizations need to understand what the laws are, how to implement those laws effectively across multiple technologies, and how to align with community expectations regarding data privacy and security in order to best leverage the power of information and technology to support your student success. So let's take a look at a common example of how and why a data governance policy will help your organization. So this is Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams is a 3rd grade teacher, and he just found a great new app to help kids with math through games. His students love to play games, and the app is free. More and more teachers like Mr. Williams are making use of apps and online services, and many providers offer innovative and helpful content, quote unquote, for free. So be wary, sometimes the saying nothing is free might apply. Some apps require acceptance of terms of service. And increasingly, online services and applications use a licensing model known as click-through acceptance, where you can simply click a button or a checkbox and accept the terms of service. So when you sign in with Google and that little button pops up and you click allow, that's the same as signing a contract. And this can lead to potential problems for students and for staff. Terms of service can be long, boring, and full of complicated language, but Mr. Williams needs to fully understand what he's agreeing to in those terms of service. We may not think of clicking an accept button as the same thing as signing a written contract, but they can be legally binding agreements. And for those reasons, Mr. Williams should talk to the appropriate individuals about his district or his organization's policies and procedures before signing up for any app like that. So as you begin preparing a data governance policy, some things that you might have on your to-do list would be to get leadership to acknowledge the need for such a policy. Designate individuals responsible for policies relating to data use and privacy. Bring the right people to the table. So consider your technology staff, but then also other leaders throughout the district. You'll probably want a communication specialist. You'll probably want someone maybe physical security experts, some of your district leadership that use technology tools like your finance department and all of the student data that they would house. Determine which policies and procedures are already in place. So note, you have policies and you have procedures. So procedures refer to a set of steps or an action plan, and then that relates to the bigger policy as a whole. You'll want to adopt any additional necessary policies and procedures for the use of student data throughout the data life cycle. So consider consequences for non-compliance as well. That would be part of the whole entire life cycle. Train your data users on relevant policies and procedures. So think about those system database administrators in your district, the people who run your student information system, the people who run your HR portals, your finance portals, all of those aspects, and have they been trained on the specific data compliance issues and things that all educational organizations have to adhere to. Think about how best to be transparent to students and parents about data. You know, there's a lot of great apps out there, and that's something that we get a lot of flack from teachers is that, you know, well, it's a free app and it's really great and the kids love it. Well, yeah, but it puts their data at risk. You know, it's not that we're trying to tell teachers no. It's not that we're trying to tell students or parents no. It's that we have a responsibility to protect that data. Oh, and I skipped my last one. Develop a monitoring plan to ensure policies and procedures are being followed. So have that sort of plan, and that's a kind of a rolling, ongoing thing. And whoever your, you know, if you assign a data compliance officer or some sort of person like that with that job. So to begin a conversation with your leadership, I wanted to include a few good resources from COSIN, the Consortium for School Networking. It's the 10 Student Data Principles, and then that was input from a group of national stakeholders. And then they also provide a privacy toolkit, which is a great resource to aid school districts in understanding their compliance requirements, and then helps them identify and evaluate the potential harms and plan effective communication for those as well. So creating a data governance policy, the process is going to be difficult and very time consuming, but a little pain now can save your organization a lot of pain later. It will take a lot of work, but protecting students and children online might just be some of the most important work that you will ever do. That is my portion of it. If you want to connect with me, that is my information there. And I will turn it over to Karen to share what her district's doing.
I'm going to share my screen, and we will start with what we're doing at Cypress-Fairbanks. So can everybody see the screen? I'm going to make an assumption that you can. Everybody seeing the screen? There you go. How's that? Got to click the right button. That button always gets you. I hadn't figured out why it has to be a button that you have to click. So again, I'm Karen Fuller. I'm the Director of Network Infrastructure and Communications with Cypress-Fairbanks ISD. Thought I'd give you an idea of where we were in the big state of Texas. So we are northwest of Houston. We are the third largest district in Texas. I think we're about 21 in the United States. We're considered a fast growth district. Got about 19,000 staff members and about 118,000 students. We've got a little over 100 instructional campuses, and we cover about 187 square miles. So if you're looking at the PowerPoint, we cover probably about this area of Harris County. So we kind of look at our address says Houston, but we're that part of Harris County. With that being said, for data privacy, student privacy, those areas in what we're focusing on is our challenges that we've had with privacy is that one, we're a growing district, and when you're growing, you've always got to continue to educate. What is cybersecurity? How do we do it? And how do you do it in a district of our size? Because, you know, a lot of the things that Ivy was talking about, that's real easy to work, and your communication seems to be tighter a lot of times when you're a smaller district. So how do we implement and model cybersecurity? And then, of course, providing remote learning. That's also been one of our challenges, which I think we're going to overcome now in the next couple of months. So I think we've got that. But then how do we make that secure? How do we ensure that we're monitoring what the students are doing when they're not with us and when they have a device? Some of the places that we've been successful is because we're a fast growth district, in May of last year, we actually passed a bond. And it's a $1.7 billion bond to last us for the next 5 years. And in that bond, we had technology funds that were appropriated. The other thing that the district has done is we've earned the Trusted Learning Environment seal. So we've got the trusting seal. And I'll tell you, to put that together, Jennifer Miller and her team, it took some time. It's not something that can happen overnight. And the other thing that we've done where we've seen successes is we've started using a data privacy agreement, and we use it with our vendors. So on screen, where we're going with this is this slide I made about a year ago doing a presentation, and I went to all the way back in the early, or maybe I should say late 1900s, as my teenager refers it to, but that's like 1980, 1990, those kind of things. And I never heard it referred to as the late 1900s, so that made me feel old when that was said. So I went back to the movies, and the movies that had to do with cybersecurity or those kind of things. So if you look at all these titles, we've always been concerned with data privacy, with security on our networks, with how everything works and how information has been gathered. And there's been quite a few movies that have been made about that. So this is not something new. It's just something new that we've all kind of woke up to and went, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with data? How do we keep it private? How do we guard it? How do we keep these kids safe for their 13 years that we have them in our schools? So what we're doing in Cypress-Fairbanks is we have applied and been awarded the Trusted Learning Seal. So we took the whole outline of the Trusted Learning Environment application and we went through it individual by each component. And we went to each area of our district and said, where are you at? How are you meeting this? And started documenting what we had and pulling up documentation. And then the things we didn't have. Well, if we don't have this, how do we put it in place? What do we need to do? How do we get teachers aware? How do we get administrators aware? And in doing and applying for that seal really started opening up eyes and minds of, oh my gosh, I need to be very careful about what I'm doing with this data, how I'm logging into my network, how I'm guarding my password, how I'm reading my emails, how I'm responding to emails. All of that started opening up a lot of minds going, you know, this is something we really got to be serious about. And unfortunately for Cypher, it wasn't huge, but we were actually breached. We got a phishing email and someone clicked on it and we had bank accounts compromised. We had paychecks transferred from their regular bank account to the bank account that they clicked on and provided the banking information on. So all of that's a part of how we start learning with data privacy and what we release and how we give that information out. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to learn the hard way. You don't get to learn the soft way. So that really got us into what it meant to apply for the Trusted Learning Environment Seal. This past legislative session in 2019, our legislation passed a bill for cybersecurity training. So it's House Bill 3834, and that is a link in this slide. And House Bill 3834 says we are now required to provide cybersecurity training for all staff. And we have to make sure that the cybersecurity training has been approved by our Department of Information Resources. There's a list of resources that we can contract with to provide the training. So all of this has just happened to Texas over the past couple of years of these are the requirements that we're having to meet. The other thing that's happened in Texas is the Texas K-12 CTO Council has adopted a data privacy agreement, and we've adopted it, and we work it so that it's applicable to all school districts in our state, so that as vendors continue to do business with schools in the state of Texas, the same data privacy agreement is applied across the state. So if you sign that data privacy agreement with Cypher, you can just sign the attachment of what we have because we've already been vetted and their agreement's been vetted and approved by legal and aligned with the data privacy agreement. The other thing that we did about data privacy is last year when we thought what was a normal world, we actually had Ryan Coltier come in and present to all of our teachers in our first week of staff development. And he presented to the teachers on data privacy. And his focus was data privacy on the personal level. How do you as a parent, as a person in the community, as your family, keep your data private? What does it look like? How do you protect your family? And then related that to how you protect your students. And we had a lot of teachers walk out of that arena really just making them really think about, okay, if I'm subscribing to this software for my students, what information is being released? What is being tracked with my students? Do I have permission to be able to give this information out about my students? Have I talked about it to my principal? Do we know what data is being collected and what they're doing with that data? So we've started offering those types of staff development to our both teachers. Ryan actually spoke with every department in the district, including our bus drivers, including our custodial group, because data privacy is just not what we do at work. Data privacy is our life. It's what we do at home. It's what we do with our banking. So I think the more we can, we're learning and discovering, the more we can make it a personal effect, the better they're going to be able to apply it in their work environment. So that was one of the things that Ryan did for us last fall when we had our staff development for the beginning of 1920 school year. The other things that we're working on is we've got some multi-factor authentication deployed at different levels, but we're working with our ID Auto, a company that we use is ID Auto, and we're actually revamping and engineering the way that we create accounts and the way those accounts are secured and the way that the teachers and staff will start logging into those accounts. Hopefully we can have that done by this December so that we are doing some type of multi-factor authentication for all staff logins to devices and or accounts that they may log into. So that's the other area that we're approaching is how do we work with staff to ensure that the accounts that they're using, the passwords, the authentication that they're using is truly them, and it's not just kind of being out on the dark web going, hey, you know, here's your password, it can be used anywhere. We also have a monitoring system, and if I can't tell you what the name of it is right now because my brain is blank, but it's a system that goes out to the dark web, and it even tells us if there's some of our accounts out there and we think that some of them have been compromised, and it comes back, reports to us, lets us know if there's been compromise, if it's been compromised. Therefore, we can change the password, watch the account, monitor the account, or disable the account if we need to. So we've really jumped into the data privacy, how the login is being used, how the data is being accessed. And we have a lot of those policies and procedures out there. And Ivy is very correct. You really need to know the difference between your policy and your procedures. In the state of Texas, if it's a policy, it's typically a board policy and it's not easy to change. But if it's a procedure, that's something that's best practices and something you're going to follow step by step. So you can change your procedures a lot easier than you can change what we call a board policy. So, and we're having to learn to distinguish between the two, and we have to learn to set up best practices. If this happens, this is what we do. If this is the way we're going to protect it, these are our procedures for protecting it. And that's where your committee that Ivy talked about has come in very handy for what we're doing inside there. Talk a little bit about the Texas K-12 CTO Council. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that organization of what we're doing in Texas. So the Texas K-12 CTO Council is a chapter of COSN, which is what Ivy mentioned, a lot of the resources that COSN offers. It's a very good group. We have the data privacy agreement that is hosted. Any school district can access that agreement by going to our website. If you're a member of the CTO Council, you get access to the database to store what vendors have signed your agreement, what were the exceptions, what it applies to. All of that information gets a lot more detailed. But if you're not a member of the Texas CTO Council or COSN, you still get access to the agreement. You still get access to be able to use it, to give the vendors and say, well, you know, Cypher signed it, here, can you sign it? This is our agreement. So we've tried to make that very much available to all the schools because we need consistency. We need to be talking the same talk and walking the same walk in the K-12 environment across the state and across the nation. The other thing that we do for that data privacy agreement is we update it every year. We update it to align with any new bills or laws that have passed in Texas or any new lessons learned that we're seeing across the United States. And we also try to align it with all the other data privacy agreements that have been released throughout the states so that ultimately one day, maybe we can have a data privacy agreement and then we just have to put our state laws as addendums on that national data privacy agreement. We also are conducting workshops on writing cybersecurity plans, and in this cybersecurity plan, we have the data privacy as a part of our cybersecurity plan. And then the state of Texas, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, developed a data security advisory council, and that council meets on a monthly basis. And in that council, we build a lot of tools that we can put out there for school districts to use on putting plans together, on putting evaluations together. Part of what we have to do as a state is we have to go through an assessment tool to actually evaluate where we are cybersecurity wise. And of course, all of that includes your data privacy. So for Cypher in Texas, that's down and dirty quick. That's what we're doing. That's how we're using it. So I'm going to exit out and open us up for questions.
Hey, I just saw going through the group chat here that Jana Hoggle asked if anyone has whatchamacallit, has data breach insurance. Either Ivy or Karen, your districts carry that?
We do. We have insurance for any type of data breaches that we have, or cybersecurity challenges when they run into. But yes, we do have we do have insurance. And the other thing that I guess we're learning through this is we're also learning that your data privacy, how you actually align in your processes and procedures that you have in place. If it's something that continues to be updated on a regular basis, the insurance companies that you purchase that data security or data cybersecurity insurance from will even give you discounts. If you've got a lot of these things in place and you've got your best practices and plans in place, that even helps with what they charge you for that cybersecurity insurance.
So another question going through the chat here. So Chamos asked, how are your districts dealing with privacy related to temperature scans of students? And student privacy, especially related to HIPAA, seems to present a big roadblock unless this is handled very carefully. Either of you address that?
I actually just pulled up, so in Kansas City, we have Children's Mercy Hospital, and they have just released some like school reopening guidelines, helpful tips and things, and they actually don't even address HIPAA regulations with that. It just says to screen temperatures. If a student screens positive, they should not go to school that day, and the parent or caregiver should be contacted immediately. So it doesn't suggest how to handle that with, you know, privacy.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of, a lot of guidance, but not a lot. It isn't all thought through, or all the scenarios haven't been unpacked yet. There's a lot, I think we're still all learning on the fly. There's so much with this, especially everyone wants to, I was thinking about, you're talking about earlier about how, everyone is offered everything for free, but no one is really, what's safe and free, right? And that's
right. Yeah.
Big challenges with this.
It's that playground. Everybody's on a digital playground. Nobody's on research duty. And I mean, it's come up as well with staff. If a staff member tests positive for COVID, they have to disclose that, and then that information is, I guess they don't have to share what specific staff member, but then with contact tracing, oh, well, have you been to this building because a staff member in this building tested positive? And then, it's only a matter of time until somebody knows who that person is. And so
looking in the chat, I see another question from Casey asking if either of you use a form for parent permission for students 13 and under related to certain apps.
We actually, my district says that if parent permission is required, about that app. If a parent wants to sign their child up for supplemental use at home, especially during school closures, virtual learning, distance learning, that is totally fine. But COPA compliance with teachers or school staff acting as parents, giving permission to use apps is a very gray area. So our district has chosen to err on the side of caution, and we do not allow our teachers to act in that capacity. As we were going through that process to make that decision, that exact question came up. And the problem with having parent permission is if you're going to go to that extent to get parent permission for every app, in terms of service, I mean, some apps require, many apps require, you have to have express parent permission for that app. and you have to have that on file. You have to keep that on file. There's no, and what our communication specialist wanted to do was like a opt-out type thing. Like, oh, hey, let's list all the apps that we might use, and parents can say, yes, the terms of service for specific apps say you have to have parent permission on file for that. So one big blanket permission is not going to cut it in that situation. So that would be my little caveat warning to anyone who is looking to go that route. It's going to be a big undertaking. And then you have the, then you have the other side of it, which is, okay, we're going to get parent permission. Well, when do we get parent permission? Okay, at the beginning of the school year. And then in September, a teacher goes to a conference and learns about this really awesome app that she wants to use with her whole class. And then you don't let that teacher use that until the next school year? Or do you do another permission asking round in January? Or what, like, how do you handle that type of stuff? So those were all questions. And then ultimately we just decided is really not explicit on saying, yeah, school staff can step in as parents. We just decided we're not going to do it.
We actually have a section in our student handbook that specifically addresses its Cypress-Fairbanks ISD parental consent for accessing internet-based instructional software and content. There's a whole paragraph that basically goes in and says, if you accept the handbook, then you accept this agreement as well. So we've incorporated all of that in our student handbook for user responsibility and everything that happens underneath network and internet terms and conditions. There's a whole statement that says that. I can share our handbook, and you can just type in apps, and that's one of the words that comes up because of Google Apps. If you want to, I'll actually copy that link in our chat. And if you want to refer to that, you can do that. So here's the link to our student handbook if you want to read that. But that's the way we approach it in Cyfair, and it seems to be working for us because you don't know, and especially if you have a district as large as ours, it's really hard to hit. My Texas accent just came out. It's really hard to hit all of those parents with signatures, so we just make it a part of our student handbook.
I was thinking about that, like, I always think of the phrase herding cats. I'm sure trying to get all the parents to sign off in a single class on a single app or something has got to be an immense challenge. Also, assuming that they read what they're actually signing or agreeing to, and understanding it and not coming back later and being like, well, I didn't say, I was wondering maybe with that handbook approach, do they maybe come back later and like, I never agreed to that. And you're like, well, it was in the handbook. And you said, yeah.
And I think that's a part of the education, that's a part of the communication that you have with your community and with your principals, especially in times like we are today. When you become a one-to-one campus, there's a lot more, and district, there's a lot more communication that has to happen with your parents and your community. So that's some of the things that we've made sure we've been able to cover in our one-to-one programs and in our handbooks. It's easier to put things in the handbook, and then when we could meet face-to-face, you always point out the highlights of the handbook when you meet with the parents. And that was one of the areas that we always pulled out to make sure they understood.
I'm curious, just your kind of experience for both of you. Do you find it maybe a challenge kind of imparting this information, trying to make parents take this seriously when they kind of don't, we all have friends who just download things and don't pay attention. Do you have or is it easier because they're acting on behalf of their student and they're kind of a little more dialed in, or is it just kind of a mix?
I would say it's a good mix. But parents, and that's the thing that, parents and schools and teachers you know, we all want to act in the best interest of the child. So that is the common ground that I always approach it from. Our job is to keep your child safe, physically, mentally, emotionally, academically, and then also now virtually, right? And so any things that we do with parents, I always talk about that. You know, it's just to keep your students safe. And we have a wide spectrum of parents who are very cautious of things, parents who, you know, we have kids that show up at school and they can't watch a YouTube video that their teacher shared because their parent has installed software on their district issued device that is blocking YouTube because that parent is uber concerned about things. And then we have parents, you know, who don't really understand how it all works. And, you know, oh yeah, let's just click and sign up. And, you know, we have parents who, you know, kids in second grade who have their own YouTube channels and things like that with their emails and social media accounts and things like that, you know, are expressly in terms of service you're not supposed to have until you're over the age of 13. So it's a good mix, I would say. I did want to say Clint asked a question to me about a resource list, and I'll email it to you, Clint, as well, but I put the link in there just for everybody. So this is the list of approved apps that we issued at the start of school closures. So it's a list of apps that were being given out for free by companies, and then also some included specifically for our district that we use. And this is like the public sharing list. So this is kind of like watered down for sharing outside of our district with no, you know, passwords and specific access and stuff. But yeah, hopefully you guys are, you know, will find that helpful. But essentially what I vet on is FERPA compliance, COPA compliance, and then if data is housed, only data housed on US soil is allowed.
Okay, we're kind of running, I know we started a few minutes late, so we're kind of getting ready to wind down here. Just before we kind of wrap up, I want to ask, is there maybe something we haven't touched upon, or you kind of, you know, you meant to talk about and all of a sudden you got to the end and we kind of drifted away from it? You know, like I always run into that, like, oh, dang, I meant to talk about X. So is there anything maybe we haven't missed or haven't, I know we can talk about it for hours and hours and hours, but is there any like major points here, or something you want to, you know, kind of a parting shot as we kind of wind down here, each of you?
I would just say that, you know, working on a data governance policy for your district is going to be a huge undertaking and take a lot of time. But it's never too early or too late to start working with staff and training them on those essential foundational practices and just best practices surrounding student data privacy and their own data privacy, as far as what types of passwords are good and where should you store passwords and what types of, you know, security things can they be doing to protect themselves as school district staff members.
I agree with Ivy. I think you just, you've got to communicate, train, make sure everybody's aware of what your processes are. And the more you can make it fit personal for them, the better they're going to understand how to apply it at their job. So it's educate, train, awareness, whatever you can do just to make people aware of this is the way that we protect ourselves. If you can protect yourself, then you can protect your district.
Okay. I want to thank both Ivy and Karen for all. This is great. There's so much great information here, and thank you for sharing your resources. I also appreciate other people who have been sharing links to their resources in the chat. That's been